At first glance, the County 1174 doesn't look like a machine that should have succeeded. Even among the unconventional tractors of the 1970s, it stands apart. The proportions seem unusual. The stance looks awkward. To many farmers seeing one for the first time, the tractor appears almost backwards, as if someone had rearranged familiar parts without considering how a tractor was supposed to look. Yet appearances can be deceptive. For years, county tractors developed a reputation that followed them wherever they went. Critics questioned the design. Competitors dismissed it. Some farmers laughed when they first saw one arrive at a dealership or pull into a field. The strange part is that many of those same people changed their minds after seeing the machine at work. That raises a larger question. How did a tractor that looks so unconventional earn a loyal following across some of the most demanding agricultural regions in Britain and beyond? To answer that, we need to look beyond the sheet metal and the oversized wheels. Because the story of the County 1174 is not really about appearance. It is about a problem that became increasingly serious as farms grew larger. Equipment became heavier, and operators pushed machines into places where traditional tractors began reaching their limits. During the post-war decades, agricultural engineering was advancing rapidly. Horsepower numbers climbed higher every year. Manufacturers competed to offer bigger engines, stronger drivetrains, and larger implements. But increased power created an unexpected challenge: getting that power to the ground. And in some parts of the countryside, that challenge was becoming impossible to ignore. By the late 1960s, many farmers had access to more horsepower than ever before. On paper, progress seemed straightforward. Larger engines meant larger implements, faster field work, and higher productivity. Reality was less cooperative. Across parts of Britain, especially in wet regions, horsepower alone was not enough. Heavy tractors often struggled when conditions deteriorated. Fields turned soft after rain. Forest tracks became difficult to navigate. Hills exposed weaknesses that brochures rarely mentioned. Operators discovered that adding power did not automatically improve performance. A tractor could have a powerful engine and still fail to put that power to use if traction disappeared beneath the wheels. The problem became particularly frustrating when expensive machines spent valuable time spinning rather than working. Manufacturers experimented with solutions. Better tires helped. Additional ballast helped. But many conventional tractors still relied heavily on their rear wheels for traction. When conditions became severe, limitations appeared quickly. Some farmers accepted these compromises as unavoidable. Others began searching for alternatives. Among contractors, forestry operators, and farmers working difficult land, interest grew in machines capable of maintaining grip where ordinary tractors struggled. This demand created an opportunity, not for a giant manufacturer with vast engineering resources, but for a relatively small British company willing to challenge assumptions that most of the industry considered settled. The engineers behind County looked at the problem differently. Instead of asking how to squeeze more power from a tractor, they focused on a more practical question. What if the real issue was how that power reached the ground? The answer would lead them toward a design that many people initially found difficult to understand. The company behind this unusual idea was not one of the agricultural industry's dominant names. County commercial cars began life far from the spotlight occupied by major tractor manufacturers. It lacked the scale of companies that produced tens of thousands of machines every year. It did not possess enormous research facilities or global dealer networks. What it did have was a willingness to explore problems that larger manufacturers often approached more cautiously. During the 1950s and 60s, County developed a reputation for converting Ford tractors into four-wheel drive machines. At the time, this was not a common feature across the agricultural world. Most tractors still relied primarily on rear-wheel traction, while four-wheel drive was often viewed as a specialized solution for demanding conditions. County saw things differently. Its engineers believed that many farmers were leaving performance on the table because too much engine power was being wasted. A tractor could generate impressive horsepower figures, but if the wheels lost grip, much of that potential simply disappeared. The company's answer was ambitious. Rather than making minor modifications, County redesigned key components of Ford tractors. New axles, transfer systems, steering arrangements, and driveline parts transformed familiar machines into something distinctly different. The approach carried risks. Every modification increased complexity. Every unconventional decision created another opportunity for critics to question the concept. And because County's tractors looked different from standard machines, skepticism arrived long before field results did. Yet the company continued refining its formula. Then came a machine that would become one of County's most recognizable creations, the County 1174. And its appearance immediately started conversations. To understand the County 1174, it helps to understand what County was actually building. The company was not creating tractors entirely from scratch. Instead, it used Ford tractors as the foundation for something much more specialized. Engines, transmissions, and certain core components originated from Ford. But once a machine entered County's workshops, it began a transformation that went far beyond a simple modification. Engineers removed major sections of the original drivetrain and replaced them with proprietary components designed specifically for four-wheel drive operation. New drive systems delivered power to both axles. Heavy-duty steering arrangements were introduced. Structural changes altered the machine's proportions and appearance. The result was a tractor that shared its ancestry with Ford but developed a very different personality. This approach offered significant advantages. County could benefit from the proven reliability and parts availability associated with Ford components, while simultaneously creating a machine capable of tackling conditions that challenged conventional tractors. But there was a cost. The more County modified the original design, the more unusual the finished product appeared. When farmers first encountered the 1174, many immediately noticed the tractor's distinctive stance. The proportions seemed unfamiliar. The wheel arrangement looked unlike most machines working nearby. Even experienced operators sometimes paused for a second look. To supporters, these features reflected practical engineering decisions. To critics, they looked unnecessary. The debate often started before the engine was even running. And as the County 1174 began appearing in fields, forests, and contracting fleets, people started asking the same question. Why had County built a tractor that looked so different from everything else? The unusual appearance of the County 1174 was not the result of styling. In fact, styling was probably the last thing on the minds of its engineers. Every major visual feature existed because of a mechanical objective. County wanted a tractor that could maintain traction, distribute weight effectively, and operate confidently in conditions where conventional machines often struggled. One of the most noticeable characteristics was its equal-sized wheels. At a time when many tractors used significantly smaller front wheels, the County stood on four large wheels of similar size. To some observers, the arrangement looked awkward. To County's engineers, it was a practical solution. Larger front wheels improved flotation and helped the tractor travel through soft ground with less resistance. More importantly, they allowed the front axle to contribute meaningfully to traction. Instead of simply guiding the machine, the front wheels became active participants in transferring power to the soil. The tractor's stance also reflected the demands of its four-wheel drive system. Components had to be positioned in ways that prioritized function over appearance. The result was a machine that looked different because it was different. Yet visual impressions are powerful. Farmers often make judgments long before operating a machine. A tractor that resembles every other tractor feels familiar. A tractor that challenges expectations must prove itself. For the County 1174, that challenge was constant. Every sale required overcoming doubts. Every demonstration became an argument in favor of the design. Every successful season added supporters, while every mechanical issue provided ammunition for critics. Before long, opinions about the tractor began to divide sharply, and the farming community found itself split into two very different camps. As more County 1174 tractors entered service, a pattern began to emerge. Very few people felt neutral about them. Among critics, the complaints were predictable. The tractor looked unconventional. Some operators questioned whether the additional complexity of the four-wheel drive system was worth the expense. Others preferred machines they already understood and trusted. For farmers who worked relatively easy ground, the advantages of the county were not always obvious. From their perspective, a conventional tractor could accomplish the same tasks without introducing unfamiliar components or engineering ideas. Supporters saw a completely different machine. Many of them operated in conditions where traction was not an occasional concern, but a daily reality. They worked heavy soils, steep terrain, forestry sites, and fields that could quickly become difficult after rain. In these environments, the county's unusual design often translated into measurable advantages. Operators reported being able to keep working when other machines struggled for grip. Tasks that normally required caution could be completed with greater confidence. The tractor's ability to transfer power through all four wheels frequently proved valuable when conditions deteriorated. As stories circulated, the county's reputation began growing, not because of advertising campaigns, not because of impressive brochures, but because farmers talked to other farmers. Word of mouth became one of the company's most effective marketing tools. A neighbor would see a county working in difficult conditions. A contractor would finish a job more efficiently than expected. A skeptical operator would witness performance that contradicted first impressions. Yet reputation alone could not settle the argument. Supporters and critics continued debating the tractor's merits. Eventually, only one thing could provide a convincing answer: the work itself. And in the field, opinions mattered far less than results. In agriculture, theory rarely survives contact with soil. The County 1174's reputation was no longer shaped in showrooms or engineering discussions. It was being shaped in fields that changed with weather, season, and workload. When conditions were dry and predictable, the tractor behaved like many others in its class. But its real value became visible when conditions turned against it. After rain, when ground softened and traction became uncertain, the differences started to matter. Operators noticed that the machine did not rely on a single driving axle in the same way as conventional tractors. Power delivery through all four wheels allowed it to maintain forward movement in situations where rear-wheel drive machines would begin to struggle. In forestry work, where uneven ground and loose surfaces were common, the tractor's stability became even more noticeable. Contractors described situations where loads could still be moved without repeated wheel spin and repositioning. That did not eliminate difficulty, but it reduced wasted time. Still, the machine was not universally praised. Some operators pointed out that the added mechanical complexity meant more systems to maintain. Others noted that turning behavior could feel different compared to standard tractors. especially for those used to traditional layouts. The learning curve was real, and not every farm environment justified the trade-offs. But the key shift was already happening. The conversation was no longer about whether the tractor looked unusual. It was about whether it worked when other machines began to fail. And as more field hours accumulated, a pattern emerged that even skeptics found difficult to ignore. In the places where traction mattered most, the county was not struggling to justify itself. It was quietly outperforming expectations. And that performance began to attract attention far beyond the farms where it first appeared. What started as a niche solution for difficult terrain gradually turned into something larger. County 1174 tractors were never designed to dominate the mass market. They were built for specific conditions where traction mattered more than simplicity. Yet in those environments, the machine began to build a reputation that even its critics had not fully anticipated. Contractors who initially approached the design with skepticism found themselves reevaluating their assumptions after extended use. The difference was not always dramatic in ideal conditions, but in marginal situations, the tractor consistently demonstrated stability where others lost efficiency. This was not a sudden breakthrough moment. It was an accumulation of small, practical advantages. Less time spent recovering from will slip, fewer interruptions in difficult ground, a more consistent ability to complete work within tight weather windows. In industries where timing could define profitability, these factors mattered. As word spread, County began to see steady demand from operators who prioritized performance over familiarity. The tractor was not replacing every conventional machine, but it was becoming the preferred choice in specific sectors. Forestry contractors, large-scale farmers, and land management operations began to form the core of its user base. At the same time, the machine's reputation remained divided. To some, it was an overcomplicated solution to a problem that did not always exist. To others, it was a practical response to real-world limitations that conventional tractors continue to struggle with. The paradox defined the County 1174's position in the market. It was never universally accepted, but it was also never easily dismissed. And while debates continued, the agricultural industry itself was beginning to change in ways that would eventually challenge even machines like the county. By the late 1970s, agricultural engineering was entering another phase of rapid change. Larger manufacturers were no longer focused only on raw traction. They were experimenting with improved hydraulics, more refined transmissions, better cab comfort, and increasingly sophisticated weight distribution systems. Machines were becoming more integrated systems rather than simple engines on frames. For County, this shift created a different kind of pressure. Their approach had been built around solving traction problems through mechanical adaptation rather than full platform redesigns. But competitors were now designing machines from the ground up as unified systems. This made the County 1174 feel both familiar and increasingly out of step with emerging expectations. In some markets, its strengths remained clear, especially where durability and traction were still the priority. However, as competition intensified, County faced challenges that engineering alone could not fully solve. The market was shifting towards standardization, global supply chains, and increasingly uniform product lines. Against this backdrop, the 1174's unusual architecture became both its advantage and its limitation. It stood out in fields, but also stood apart from the direction the industry was taking. That gap would eventually define the machine's place in history, not as a mainstream success, but as a design that represented a specific answer to a specific problem that the broader market slowly moved away from. By the time the County 1174 began to fade from active production, Its reputation had already moved beyond simple classification. It was no longer just a tractor that looked unusual or worked differently. It had become a reference point in discussions about what agricultural engineering could be when it stepped outside conventional design boundaries. In hindsight, its story is not one of complete success or failure, but of specificity. The machine solved a particular set of problems extremely well, especially those related to traction, stability, and performance in difficult ground conditions. In those environments, it earned respect that no visual judgment could erase. Yet the broader market was moving in another direction. Standardized platforms, cost efficiency, and global manufacturing strategies became more important than specialized adaptations. Machines that required less explanation, less modification, and less debate began to dominate. As a result, the County 1174 gradually transitioned from a working tool into a remembered design. Among enthusiasts and operators who had used it, however, its reputation persisted. It was remembered not for how it looked, but for what it did when conditions were at their worst. In those moments, the backwards appearance no longer mattered. Function outweighed first impressions. The final question the tractor leaves behind is not whether it was right or wrong in design. It is whether the industry moved past it or simply in a different direction. And that question is why the County 1174 is still discussed long after its production ended.